2016. I'm excited to be back with you, and today we're talking about discovery again, and I want to talk about this essay task that I've set you guys in the holidays. We're basically just going to break down the question that I've given you and just go through a few of the things that you need to do in the planning stages. Now, first of all, something that's really important is this thing, and if you haven't filled this in, or at least if you haven't filled it in for, say, 2 extra poems that we've done in class, then you're really going to be at a disadvantage in this essay task. The whole purpose behind this DET table, the Det Table, is for you to be able to use the evidence you write down in your essay tasks. So before you even think about this essay, you might want to think about a thesis, maybe, before you actually start it, but you need to get this table filled in because it'll provide all the evidence that you need for the essay. Alrighty, so let's have a look at the question. The process of discovery, which is our impetus, process, and ramification, involves uncovering what is hidden and reconsidering what is known. How is this perspective on discovery explored in your prescribed text and one other related text? Now you remember, and we've got this in this booklet that I've given you for this essay question, that we broke down the question in class and we focused on the 2 major elements of the question. So the process of discovery, again, our impetus, process, and ramification, involves uncovering what is hidden. So first of all, from Frost poems, what poems explore a process of discovery, which all of them do, that uncovers something that's hidden? And it's really your choice. Whatever poem you most understand and you feel that you connect with the most is the poem that you should choose for this essay task. Now, your related text that you completed for your assessment task, the portfolio assessment task, would be a good text to use for this question. Because if you've chosen it, there's going to be something that's been hidden, that's been uncovered, even if it is a rediscovery. And there's going to be a process of discovery within it. So the first thing you really need to decide is what Frost poems are you going to choose for this task. Now the second part of the question involves reconsidering what is known. So again, are there any Frost poems that you understand to be a reconsidering of what is known? For example, does the speaker in Mending Wall reconsider by the end of the poem the way that he feels towards his neighbour? You may actually find in this part that some of the text that you put here may be different or the same to some of the text here. And if you have a match where you write down, well, stopping in woods on a snowy evening, I've got this in both of the categories, then it might be a text that you want to choose for this essay task. So go through and answer these questions. You already have, if you were in class when we were here, and the same for the related text part. Now this second part of the question where it says, how is this perspective on discovery explored in your prescribed text and one of the other related texts? You remember that with how type questions, we're always talking about the how of the text. How does the text display something? And it's always talking about techniques. So this part of the question is just reminding us that we need to be referring to the techniques and the construction of the text in our answer as well. So once you select the text that you're going to write, you need to write down the first Frost poem that you're going to use and answer the following questions and connect some of the evidence to this part of the question. Now this is why that discovery evidence table is going to come in handy, because for example here with the tuft of flowers, which I've done, I've already mapped out the process of discovery, and I've already got the techniques and the key evidence identified. So for me, it would just be a matter of slotting them into place. But for you, no matter where you're up to with the discovery evidence table, you need to fill in the evidence that you're going to be using and how it supports the process of discovery, what is hidden that is uncovered, the tuft of flowers, for example, and what understanding is reconsidered, his feelings of being connected to mankind. and then what's the evidence to support it. You'll do the same with the second poem, and you'll do the same with the related text here. Now, all we've done so far is we've looked at the question, we've thought about what poems we might use, and that could change if we feel like when we start writing our thesis that maybe another poem fits in better. So we've chosen the potential poems that we're going to use, and we've just started to draft out some of the evidence that we're going to use to answer this question. Now, the hard bit comes when you get to this stage, when you actually start writing out the thesis. You'll remember that a thesis is your answer to the question, and it's a general statement that is going to inform the rest of your essay. Remember that you're always trying to prove your thesis with the evidence that you give. So a good thesis, to remind you, will use some key terms from the question, such as uncovering what is hidden and reconsidering what is known. It will integrate some key terms from the rubric, such as the process or the rediscovery, if there's a theme of rediscovery within the poems that you choose, and the related text that you choose. It will give an insight in relation to the question, which means it won't just repeat the question, but it will give the reader a greater understanding of these elements, what is hidden and reconsidering what is known. And it will also use some synonyms to avoid key terms. Now, at this stage, the main thing that you need to do is actually to create the thesis. Once you get an idea of the text that you're using, you've got to create a thesis, and you've got to refine it so that your essay gets off to a really, really solid start, and it'll obviously inform the rest of your essay. And the part that I want to do next is actually look at that sample essay that we went through in class, just to remind you about the thesis and remind you about the structure of the essay. So I'll get it up here. Now, all of these notes you should actually have on the sheet unless you were away. But just to remind you, the essay always starts with the thesis statement, which we've written in here. And the question that I did a sample essay for was different. This question, discoveries by their very nature change our ways of thinking and our values. So the two parts that I'm looking at is how does a discovery change ways of thinking and change our values? And the same ending, how does this statement exploit in your prescribed text and one other related text? Let's just have a quick look at this thesis here. So discoveries act as the impetus for a heightened awareness of self, others, and the world, and force a person to re-examine their values and ways of thinking. So, what's the new insight that I'm giving in my thesis? Basically, how am I answering this question? And the main part is this phrase here, heightened awareness of self, others, and the world. Within the Frost poems that I've chosen, I'm going to be looking at discoveries that act as an impetus, so a starting place for a heightened, which means a higher awareness of self, others, and the world. The speaker themselves, the people that are around them, and then wider than that, the world that is around them, including nature, but also including other people and communities. I've also said that discoveries force a person to re-examine their values and ways of thinking. So the discoveries that I'm going to look at force or prompt the person to re-examine their values, so the things that they hold tightly, the ways that they behave and the way that they live, and also their ways of thinking. So maybe the way that they process something or the way that they think about somebody else. This thesis statement, while it is quite small, was actually really challenging to come up with, and it took me a lot of time to get it right. And I really encourage you to practice, write a few different thesis statements and send them through to me, and I can give you some advice on how to maybe combine them together or find something that's good. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but I just want to point out these features of the structure that you need to understand. So the next part of the introduction involves giving the reader an understanding of what text you're actually going to be speaking about, which I do here. And then beginning to connect the texts to the thesis of your essay. So all of these texts here explore discoveries that trigger reconsideration of previously held beliefs and interpretations of the world. These reconsiderations both positively and negatively enforce a change in the persona's perception of others and their personal context. So again, I'm being more specific now about the impacts of these discoveries. So here I'm talking very generally about how they force a person to re-examine their values. And here I'm talking about that these reconsiderations, which can be both positive and negative, enforce a change in the persona's perceptions of others and their personal context. Here I'm focusing that these texts focus primarily on their perceptions of others and the world that's around them, so their personal context. Okay, let's have a look quickly again at the body paragraphs. So the structure of a body paragraph goes something like this. You have a thesis statement that connects to the question. So you've got in your mind what you want to talk about in a bit more detail about discovery. And in this case, I'm talking about nature and how it can trigger, so world, how nature can trigger powerful self-discoveries that lead to a re-evaluation of previously held understandings. And next, we have a point sentence that clarifies the thesis statement up here. In Robert Frost's Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, the speaker's engagement with the woods is the impetus for his newfound desire to avoid his social obligations and responsibilities. So, nature is replaced with woods, more specific, and is the impetus for his newfound desire to avoid his social obligations and responsibilities. This is referring to this part of the thesis, leads to a re-evaluation of previously held understandings. After we've got the point sentence down, it really becomes quite easy because you're basically just connecting the evidence that you've already found from the table and putting it into your essay. I like to start, when I'm giving evidence, to use evidence from the start of the poem and gradually work my way through, so I've got a continuity, unless there's a symbol that I want to talk about that goes throughout the whole poem. So I start off with evidence at the start, the impetus, and then I go through, and usually my final evidences are towards the end of the poem because it makes logical sense to follow it that way. So here, we've got blended evidence and explanation sentences that try to prove the thesis. And it continues here again, embedding the techniques that are used and the effect of those techniques on the audience. Next, you can see that I'm blending in some examples, some summarized examples, some embedding of the key terms. So for alliteration, I've included the actual alliteration itself. Now you'll notice the two different colors here, the purple and the blue. And you'll remember that I had two parts to my point sentence that I wanted to connect evidence to. So first of all, I've included evidence that shows the speaker's engagement with the woods, which are these examples here. And then with the blue color, I've tried to connect evidence to this part. So you should be able to see quite clearly that this evidence supports that part of the thesis. So here, these are all supporting the examples from that blue part of the point sentence. And then finally, a link sentence that uses a nice text connective that tries to sum it all up and basically say to the audience that based on all that I've said, this is how my thesis has actually been proven. And we're talking now about the thesis in the essay. Alrighty, well, that's it for now. I just wanted to go over some of these parts that we've been through in class to remind you of them and hopefully give you a bit of a kickstart to writing this discovery essay. Now, if you send me some direct questions about the essay task, I'd be more than happy to write up and complete videos on those specific questions. So if you have any specific questions that you want to ask, now is the time to hit me back, and I'll give you some direct feedback on those. So please get started on this as soon as possible, and have fun with it.